La dame que nous allons accueillir a pour elle la beauté, la richesse et une couronne. Elle aurait pu s'en contenter et faire la une des magazines en papier glacé, mais c'est aussi une jeune femme de son temps qui s'est passionnément engagée dans la lutte contre la pauvreté, pour l'amélioration de l'éducation dans le monde et singulièrement de l'éducation des filles par laquelle passe désormais tout le développement économique de nos sociétés. J'ai donc le privilège et l'honneur, en votre nom à tous, d'accueillir Sa Majesté, la reine Rania de Jordanie. Your Majesty, I believe it's the second time you are here in the Sorbonne.
Yes.
The first time you were together with the king,
husband, yes.
your husband, but he was doing the talking,
Absolutely.
and now it's your turn.
That's my turn. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Victor Hugo once called Paris an immense hospitality. Cole Porter sang that Paris is a timeless town, from the winter when it drizzles to the summer when it sizzles. And Frank Sinatra described April in Paris as a feeling no one can ever reprise. I promise I will spare you the pleasure of my bursting into song here today, but I am delighted to be here. Or more accurately, I should say, I'm delighted to be back, because my family and I are frequent visitors to your beautiful country. I'll always remember joining my husband, His Majesty King Abdullah, here 9 years ago, shortly after the death of his father, His Majesty King Hussein. We were both deeply moved when, to mark the visit, the city of Paris named a street in honor of His late Majesty. King Hussein loved France, from his first meeting with General de Gaulle to the many trips he made to this country over the course of his life. And this country holds a very special place in my heart, too. France was one of the first countries I visited after I came into this position. Back then, I was very young, daunted by the enormity of the responsibility and not used to being in the public eye. And yet, the warm embrace I received from the French people steadied me, gave me courage, and bolstered my conviction. And that has remained with me to this day. Yes, I could talk for hours about your wonderful country, but that's not why I've been invited here today. I'm here to talk about engagement, which is, of course, the theme of this year's Cité de la Réussite. Engagement in the sense of dedicating ourselves to the betterment of humanity and working as individuals and together for understanding, global harmony, and peace. And I think it's especially appropriate that we are meeting at the Sorbonne, not only because this has long been a center of international enlightenment, but also because the Sorbonne was the birthplace of one of the greatest symbols of global harmony, the modern Olympic Games, which began on this day 112 years ago. When Pierre de Coubertin first founded the International Olympic Committee here at the Sorbonne, he understood the Games could be more than just a simple competition. He saw the Games as a time for humankind to join in shared celebration, where all would have the chance to do their best and to bring out the best in one another, where people could be judged by their ability and achievement, not by color, background, or creed. The Olympic spirit of friendship, solidarity, and fair play taps into universal values people everywhere understand. And yet, too often, in our day-to-day lives, we fall short of these noble ideals. And this is tragic, because more than ever, we are all on the same team, facing problems like poverty, climate change, and disease that humankind can only solve by joining together. In part, our lack of true global community is a backlash to globalization. As borders blur and new cultures make their mark on old societies, many people are finding the shifting social landscape profoundly unsettling. Suddenly, we seem to be living side by side, yet we're not sure we're prepared to be neighbors. And for many people, the instinctive response is to pull back instead of reaching out, fearing that the few things that make us different are more important than the many things that make us the same. But over time, failing to get to know one another makes the tensions grow worse, not better. It allows preconceptions and biases to stand in for personal experience. And we see the results in the mutual misunderstanding afflicting the world's diverse cultures, not only among different countries, but increasingly within them as well. For me, as an Arab, a Muslim, and a mother of four, the schism that worries me most is the growing gulf of perception and trust between the Muslim world and the West. The only people who benefit from our disunity are the extremists, the very forces who threaten the hopes we share for a brighter tomorrow. Too often, this rift is reflected and reinforced by the tone of our interactions. Whether the issue is how to balance the right to free speech with the need for respect among faiths, or the wearing of religious symbols, or the root causes of conflict, or immigration, or Islam itself. Instead of joining in conversation, each side feels the other is shouting. Both sides feel increasingly aggrieved. Emotions overtake fact. And just as troubling, the lack of empathy for each other can limit our own potential for progress. Because when we are blind to one another's point of view, we often cease to look inward as well. Perhaps as children, some of you read La Besace by La Fontaine. In that fable, Jupiter, the mythological god, summons all living things to gather at his throne. He tells the animals he is happy to fix any problems they might have with themselves, and asks them all, "Are you satisfied with yourself the way you are?" The monkey begins. He says he thinks he's just fine, but that the bear's features are too coarse. Then the bear loudly praises his own physique, but says the elephant is misshapen and ugly. The elephant says Madame Whale is too fat. Madame Ant says the mite is too small. And so it goes until Jupiter, angry, sends them all away. But La Fontaine writes that among all the creatures, humankind is the craziest of all. For in his words, we forgive ourselves everything and forgive other men nothing. The lesson here is that without self-awareness, there can be no self-improvement. And clearly, repairing the rift between East and West must begin with self-assessment on both sides. In the Arab region, if we truly wish to see global peace and progress, we know we must start by ending the conflicts within our own societies. We know that as Muslims, we cannot complain that we are negatively stereotyped by the West unless we ourselves address some of the factors behind those perceptions. And while we are right to deplore Islamophobia and the branding of Muslims as terrorists, we must face up to the fact that many terrorist attacks in recent years have been committed by people who wrongly claim to be acting in the name of Islam. And I cannot speak for the West. I cannot suggest the issues for introspection or the areas for self-assessment. But I hope that you will think about what they might be. Because building cross-cultural acceptance has to be a two-way street. Dialogue requires us all to take part, to share, to speak, and to listen. Because in La Fontaine's story, the lash of insult and injury is handed from one creature to the next. But in real life, what we often see is mutual recrimination, the downward spiral of reproach and retaliation that becomes ever harder to stop. We must break that cycle. We have to restore a sense of shared humanity, of connection, compassion, and willingness to stand in one another's shoes. And it may sound daunting, but I believe there is real cause for optimism too, starting with the findings of a fascinating poll that Gallup released earlier this year. On the one hand, the poll shows that many in Europe and the United States are convinced the Muslim world isn't committed to improving relations with the West. Likewise, large majorities in every Middle Eastern country surveyed said they don't think the West is committed to better relations with the Muslim world. At the same time, people on both sides say in overwhelming numbers that the quality of the relationship between the Muslim and Western worlds is something important to them. In other words, East and West both honestly believe it is important to fix the relationship, but both sides genuinely think that the other side doesn't feel the same way. So the problem isn't that people don't care, it's that they don't see their caring reflected. They don't perceive an equal sense of commitment from the other side. We can change this, but we have to start by dismantling mutual stereotypes. We have to reject easy caricatures in favor of close inspection, whether we're dealing with matters of integration and assimilation, or international relations more broadly, or the simple act of getting to know others different from ourselves. That's why I recently set up a YouTube account so that YouTubers everywhere can join in a cyber conversation and break down the damaging stereotypes of the Arab world which malign my region and its people. I hope to show viewers everywhere the truth about the part of the world I cherish and call home. And the interesting thing is that we can exchange knowledge. We forge friendships in the process. Virtual handshakes are extended, and new paths of understanding and acceptance are formed. It's that kind of caring that matters, and it can't be decreed or imposed from above. It has to emerge from the bottom up, one open mind and open heart at a time. And here, in this great institution of learning, I want to challenge each of you to do your part. For those of you who are students, know that it is your future that is at stake. You are the ones who will inherit the world that is taking shape today. You must decide if you want it to be a world of greater division or greater unity. I'm told that in May 1968, one of the student slogans was, "Those who lack imagination cannot imagine what is lacking." Well, I believe your generation has all the imagination you need to see where gaps need mending and how progress can be made. You were born at a time of increasing multicultural awareness. You have already been exposed to many more and different cultures than your grandparents could have imagined. You live in the country with the largest Muslim population in Europe. And you know that Islam is not monolithic, but a vibrant mosaic of cultures. You know it because you have seen Islam's diversity for yourselves in the North Africans, South Asians, Middle Easterners, Turks, and many more who are proud to call France their home. In addition, you know better than anyone the power of interconnectedness. Your generation has been enormously creative in building virtual networks that span the globe. From Skyrock and YouTube, from wikis to blogs, you're transmitting ideas in new ways, exploring new outlets to express your views, and creating global communities online. Your openness and your willingness to connect will both be powerful assets in replacing barriers of fear and mistrust with bridges of friendship and peace. And just as the Olympic torch is passed from hand to hand, together, you can create a fellowship of understanding that lights the way ahead. You can be champions of peace and hope. And when you triumph, so will we all. Thank you all very much.
Your Majesty, it's quite ironical, 40 years later in this very room, to hear you talk about May 68, but of course you weren't born then. If you just hold your mic. In your speech, you made many references to our culture, and we thank you for that. And of course, you made many references to the strain of globalization. And I think we're all very much aware, and it's a theme which has been recurrent, of course, yesterday in the debates, and which will be again this afternoon, that economic globalization is going faster than understanding, multicultural understanding. What, in your view, should be the right tools to try and accelerate the capacity of that cultural understanding in a world that is really shrinking so fast?
Well, I will agree with you that in many ways we seem to be embracing the upsides of globalization. You know, we are enjoying the increased commerce, we are enjoying the communication tools that are available at our fingertips. We are all excited by the new and exotic restaurants that may be opening down our street, but we're not very excited about living side by side with people who are different from ourselves. And you asked me about the tools. I think we all have the tools. The tools are in our minds and in our attitudes, and we have those. It depends, though, how we want to use them. They could either be used as tools to build or tools to destroy. And we've seen both in action. So, for example, we saw the violence that came as a result of the printing of the cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad and how that was extremely destructive. And yet we see, for example, in events like the Olympics or music festivals or sports tournaments, how human beings unite together behind the banner of their common humanity and really forge the way forward. So I think it's in our attitudes. We have to begin by making a conscious effort to free ourselves from the shackles of stereotypes, because that's what limits us. There's always the fear of the unknown. So, you know, when our societies are changing very, very quickly, suddenly there are so many different religions and cultures living side by side. And because it's something we don't know, then the reaction is to be scared, to crawl into your own shell. But you have to make a conscious effort to venture out of your comfort zone, to really reach out to the person that's different from you, and to remember that at the other end of fear is freedom. Once you can confront your fear, then you'll free yourself. So if you have freedom on one end, if you have fear on one end and you have freedom on the other, to get from this point to this point will happen through knowledge and interaction. And we all have to make a very conscious effort to do that.
Do you find in your own experience that the media are the vehicles for stereotypes? And why have you chosen YouTube to convey your own message?
Absolutely, I feel the media plays an extremely important role, and that role can actually be productive as well. What I can tell you is whatever tools we've been using, it looks like it hasn't worked because the situation hasn't necessarily improved. The relations between East and West are not at their best. Our world is divided, not just across lines of East and West, but also within societies. So we see some disunity and lack of harmony and some violent acts happening. We've seen here in France and other countries in Europe. So using a tool like YouTube taps into perhaps a group of people that we haven't traditionally tapped into, and that is the youth. I think the youth are going to be the impetus for change. They are the ones who are going to inherit the world. They are the ones who have to decide what they want this world to look like. And I feel that YouTube engages young people. And, you know, we all know young people are all about energy, change, and opportunity. And I'd like to see how we can engage the youth of this world into this very, very important conversation that needs to take place, that's not taking place at the moment.
Before we give the floor to all these very bright young people who will ask you their own questions, let me ask you a couple of questions about your own engagement, which is very much the theme that brings us together. There's, of course, a tradition that, you know, the rich and the powerful engage into charities. But somehow you have transformed this traditional role into something else. Is that because of your education, or because you actually live in a part of the world where there's so much tragedy and so much conflict and so much harm being done on all sides?
Well, I think regardless of what my area looks like, I think that in my position I have to be able to respond to the needs and the circumstances in which I live. And I've found personally that, you know, charity is important and it does a lot of good, but being more engaged adds a bit more value. So for me, it's important for me to really roll up my sleeves, to really dig into the subject, to know more about it. Because I feel that if I do that, then I can give that extra 20% that's going to make maybe 80% of the difference. And I find that it's also more rewarding for me on the personal level to know that I know my subject matter more, I know what the issues on the ground are, and I can try to be as creative as possible to think out of the box and come up with solutions. And you know, I think I'm in a very privileged position to be able to represent my people. And to present my people, I really have to be in touch with their challenges, with their aspirations, with their ambitions, with their dreams. Because a big part of my job is to tell the story of Jordan. And that's something I have the honor of doing, to try to portray to the world what Jordan is about, what my people are about, and to try to challenge some of the misconceptions that people have. So some of the things that you hear are true, but there are also a lot of another side of the Middle East that many people don't really know or have given a chance to look at.
Thank you very much. Let us now turn to our friends here. They have prepared lots of questions for you. And I will start with Paul. Paul is a student at HEC, which is one of our best schools of, how could I describe HEC, Paul?
Business school.
Business school. Hold up your mic, if you will.
Your Majesty, you've talked a lot about the importance of creating a multicultural environment. But how can we, all of us, pragmatically build a true multicultural environment?
Well, I must say it is not an easy job. Living in the same neighborhood is not multiculturalism. Multiculturalism is when you invite your neighbor into your home, into your mind, into your head, into your heart. That's multiculturalism, when you try to get to know the person, his background, his culture, his history, his nuances. And as I said, that's when the interaction leads to a situation where our differences just become differences. They don't become problems. And I believe that it's not necessarily through groundbreaking summits or big policies that we achieve multiculturalism, but it's in the small human-to-human acts that we can do every single day, and that each one of you is able to do. It's just to venture out, as I said, from your comfort zone and reach out to the person that's a little bit different from yourself, and realize that those differences are enriching. And you can learn a lot from those differences, and they can be a source of knowledge and excitement in our life rather than violence and problems. And to understand, that multiculturalism is not a choice. I mean, it's an imperative if we are to succeed, if we are to give our children a fair chance at a good future, a peaceful future, then it's time for us to embrace people that are different from ourselves. And I feel that France is a fantastic place to start, because this is a country that lives and breathes culture, and there's so much excitement and hunger and a thirst for different cultures here. And if we can harness that in a positive way, then I think this country could really set an example for other countries in Europe and the rest of the world of what multicultural societies can really look like.
Alix, from the School of Political Science in Paris.
Your Majesty, do you think that about multiculturalism, again, it is sustainable in every society? Do you think that sharing some fundamental values or speaking a common language is necessary to obtain a peaceful and sustainable multicultural environment?
Well, you know, I think each one of us has a specific mix of language, culture, and background that defines who we are and where we come from. It makes me who I am, and it makes you who you are. It makes each one of us unique, and that's something to be proud of. And I believe that anything that robs us of our individuality and diminishes our culture is a negative. So I don't think it's a matter of speaking the same language or agreeing on everything. I think more important than agreeing, there's a fundamental human instinct of wanting to be heard and understood. Every human being on this planet has that human instinct. So if we can just perfect or acquire the talent of engaged and committed listening, then that shows a great deal of respect to the person. And from respect comes trust. And once trust is there, then you have a very solid foundation. And as I said earlier, if the trust is there, then differences between people remain differences. They're no longer divisive. And that's the place we need to get to. And you know, as I said in my speech, the polls show that people in the West really care about better relations with the East, and people in the East really care about better relations with the West. But both sides think that the other side doesn't care enough. So this tells me two things. First of all, it tells me that there's not enough faith and trust in the other person's intention. And it also tells me that we're not communicating, because we both want the same thing, but we don't even realize it. So I think better communication is absolutely fundamental here.
A young Jordanian lady, Susan, she's a student here at the Sorbonne. You're studying tourism, is that right?
Your Majesty, how did you decide to sacrifice your career in the banking sector or in business in general to dedicate your time to your family? Do you think that this kind of behavior is precisely what prevents women from assuming leadership positions in business and the economy? Thank you.
Well, I really don't see it as a sacrifice. For me, it was more of a career move, and I'm still very much a working woman. I have a team of people. I have commitments, both locally, regionally, internationally. Being here is one of those commitments. I enjoy my work very much, but like any other working woman would tell you, the important thing is for it not to be either or. You shouldn't have to make a choice between your family and work. Many of us try to do both. I can tell you it is not easy. It requires a lot of planning. We make mistakes. We suffer from guilt, but we do it, and most of the time we do it well. But it's also equally important for us to really respect those women who do decide to stay at home and take care of their children. Because I tell you, taking care of kids is no easier than the most high-powered job you can get. And we should not look down on women who decide to stay at home. You know, people do this for different reasons, be it personal, financial, or cultural reasons. But it's a choice that we have to respect for women. And you know, the prospects for women in the Arab world are improving. You know, we still have very low participation in the workforce. But a recent survey has shown that the mindsets are changing and perspectives are changing. Men are saying that they increasingly want to see women vote in politics. They want to see women working in positions in which they qualify. They feel that they have equal rights. They should have equal rights. So the mentalities are changing, and I think that's